The city was alive with its usual rush, people glued to their phones, rushing past one another, but CEO Alexander Reed walked alone, his heart heavier than the empire he managed. Success had brought him wealth, fame, and respect, but not joy. His wife had passed away years ago, leaving him with a silence money could never fill. He moved like a man surrounded by glass walls, untouchable, unreachable. That evening, after yet another endless meeting, he walked out of his towering office building, lost in thought. Suddenly, he felt a gentle tug at his hand. Startled, he looked down. A little girl, no more than 6 years old, gazed up at him with wide brown eyes. Her small fingers clutched his, as if she'd known him forever. "Sir?" she whispered softly, her voice trembling yet full of innocence. "Mommy needs a smile. Could you give her one?" For a moment, Alexander was frozen. No one had dared touch him, much less ask something so simple, so human. His lips parted, but no words came. The little girl's eyes didn't waver. They were pleading, not for herself, but for someone else. And in that moment, something cracked inside him. He had been untouchable for years, yet this small, fragile hand broke through his fortress. He didn't know who she was or who her mother might be, but he knew this. That single touch had shifted something deep within his soul. Alexander knelt slowly so he could meet the girl's eyes. Her dress was faded, the hem slightly torn, yet she stood with quiet dignity. He cleared his throat, unsure of what to say. "And where is your mommy?" he asked gently. The little girl pointed across the street. There, sitting on a worn wooden bench, was a woman with her head bowed, her hands covering her face. Her shoulders shook as if the weight of the world pressed down on them. "My mommy's tired," the child explained, her voice trembling. "She works all the time, but she never smiles anymore. I thought maybe you could help." Alexander's chest tightened. He was a man used to signing billion-dollar contracts, yet this request, simple, pure, impossibly human, shook him in a way he hadn't felt in years. Without thinking, he took the girl's hand and let her lead him toward the bench. As they approached, the woman lifted her head, startled. Her eyes widened at the sight of the suited stranger beside her daughter. For a moment, Alexander saw something hauntingly familiar in her expression: loss, exhaustion, and silent despair. "Mommy," the little girl said softly, tugging her sleeve. "This nice man is here to give you a smile." The woman's lips parted in confusion, then embarrassment. But before she could protest, Alexander did something he hadn't done in years. He smiled, warm, unguarded, and real. And just like that, the air shifted. The woman's eyes filled with tears, not of sorrow this time, but of release. That single smile, born of a child's innocent request, carried more power than any words could. For a long moment, the world seemed to pause. The honking of cars, the chatter of passers-by, all faded into silence. Alexander's smile, something he had almost forgotten how to do, hung gently between them. The woman blinked rapidly, her tears spilling over. I'm sorry," she stammered, wiping her cheeks. "We didn't mean to bother you. My daughter, she has a kind heart." Alexander shook his head slowly. "No," he said, his voice lower than usual, almost reverent. "She hasn't bothered me. In fact, I think she just saved me." The woman's brows furrowed in confusion. Alexander's words weren't the kind of thing strangers usually said, but there was truth in them. For years, he had lived in polished boardrooms and silent penthouses, building walls no one dared cross. Yet here, on a public bench with a tearful woman and a little girl, he felt something stir, something painfully human. The little girl, still holding his hand, beamed. "See, Mommy? I told you smiles are like magic." Her innocence was disarming. Alexander chuckled softly, surprising himself. He hadn't laughed, not genuinely, in years. "Why were you crying?" he asked the woman gently. She hesitated, ashamed, but the truth slipped out. "It's been hard. Work, bills, raising her alone. Some days it feels like I can't keep going." Alexander's heart clenched. He saw in her eyes the reflection of his own loneliness, his own battles, though theirs were fought in different worlds. And for the first time, instead of feeling like a distant observer, he felt connected. That night, under city lights, a billionaire CEO and a struggling mother found themselves bound by the smallest of bridges, a child's touch, a smile, and the reminder that even strangers can change each other's worlds. The little girl climbed into her mother's lap, hugging her tightly. "Don't cry, Mommy. Everything's going to be okay," she whispered with the certainty only children possess. Alexander sat beside them on the bench, his expensive suit oddly out of place against their worn clothes. Yet for once, he didn't care. He felt something shift in him, a quiet urgency to do more than just smile. "You remind me of someone," he said softly, looking at the woman. "My wife. She carried burdens she never spoke about. I thought money was enough to ease her struggles, but sometimes, people just need someone to see them." The woman's lips trembled. She didn't know what to say. This man wasn't speaking like a stranger, or like a CEO, but like someone who understood pain. "I see you," Alexander added gently. "And I see her," he said, nodding toward the little girl now resting her head on her mother's shoulder. The woman exhaled shakily. For months she had been invisible, another tired face in the crowd, another single parent trying to survive. But in this moment, under his gaze, she felt seen. "Thank you," she whispered, clutching her daughter closer. "I didn't think anyone noticed." Alexander smiled again, this time steadier. "She noticed," he said, pointing at the child. "She noticed you needed more than strength, you needed joy. And she was brave enough to ask for it." The woman's tears fell freely now, but they carried a strange relief. For the first time in a long while, she felt a tiny flame reignite, hope. And Alexander realized something profound. This meeting wasn't chance. It was a reminder that even the smallest voices could awaken the deepest truths. The little girl suddenly looked up at Alexander, her eyes sparkling with a mix of innocence and wisdom far beyond her years. "Sir," she said softly, "you smiled at Mommy. But when was the last time someone smiled at you?" The question caught him off guard. Alexander opened his mouth, but no answer came. He searched his memory. Boardrooms filled with polite nods, social events brimming with empty compliments, a cold mansion with no laughter echoing through its halls. He realized the truth. It had been years since anyone had smiled at him with love, without expectation. He swallowed hard, blinking away a sting in his eyes. I can't remember," he admitted honestly. The little girl grinned and reached up, placing her tiny hand on his cheek. Then she smiled, the kind of smile that lit up the dark corners of a soul. "Then this is for you," she said. Alexander froze, overwhelmed. A child he'd never met had just given him something priceless, genuine warmth. For the first time in years, the loneliness inside him cracked wide open, replaced by a strange, healing light. The mother watched in silence, tears slipping down her face. "You don't know what you've done," she whispered. But Alexander did. That small touch, that innocent gift of kindness, had changed everything. He wasn't just a CEO anymore. He was a man reminded of his humanity, of the power of simple connection. In that moment, 3 lives, wealthy, struggling, and innocent, were bound together by something greater than circumstance, the rediscovery of hope through kindness. And Alexander knew this was only the beginning. The night had deepened, but none of them seemed to notice. Alexander, the woman, and her daughter sat together as if the world outside had slowed just for them. For years he had been praised as a man who built empires, but at that bench, he realized true power was not in wealth, it was in compassion. He stood slowly and extended his hand to the woman. "What's your name?" he asked. "Clara," she answered softly. "And yours?" he asked, turning to the little girl. "Lily," she replied with a shy smile. Alexander repeated their names as though committing them to memory. "Clara. Lily, thank you. You've given me something I couldn't buy, something I thought I lost forever." Clara looked at him, still uncertain. "We didn't do anything special." But Alexander shook his head. "You did everything. You reminded me what it means to live, not just exist. The little girl tugged his sleeve once more. Then promise you'll keep smiling, for Mommy, and for yourself. He bent down, meeting her gaze, and said with conviction, I promise. As they parted ways, Alexander felt lighter than he had in years. He watched them walk away, the little girl holding her mother's hand, and he knew their paths had crossed for a reason. That night, when he returned to his vast, lonely home, something was different. The silence no longer felt empty. There was warmth in his chest, a seed of change, planted by a child's touch and a simple request. Mommy needs a smile. From that day forward, Alexander carried their faces in his heart. And each time he smiled, it wasn't for boardrooms or cameras, it was for the humanity he had rediscovered. A single touch. A single smile. And everything had changed.